Hi everyone, I hear this a lot recently. How do I start a business in this kind of economy? There's a lot of inflation, we're heading to a recession. How do I start a business? Well, I have good news for you. The trend has said that wealth and successful businesses start during a recession. So, keep your positive mind because today we're going to talk about how to create a successful business regardless if this is an inflated economy or a recession. Hi, my name is Alejandra Santos, CEO and founder of Startup Tandem, where we build the business and finance infrastructure to early stage and growth startups. So there are a few things that you have to take into consideration when you start a business. One of the first things I like to do, and I tell people to do all the time, is to create an external analysis, industry analysis. And what I mean by that, I usually follow Porter's 5 forces criteria, where I look at the 5 threats in an industry, and those are threat of entry, right? So if barriers to entry are low, the threat will be high, and that is when there is very low requirement of capital or when there's low regulations of the state or federal to enter that industry. The other one is threat of substitutes, and substitutes are your indirect competitors. So if you are selling a product like iced tea, then your indirect competitor of iced tea will be water or a smoothie or a green juice, just anything a consumer would want to have instead of iced tea that is not iced tea competitor directly. Going on the topic, the threat of competitors. Direct competitors are also a threat. If there is a lot of competitors in an industry, you would say the threat is high. The threat of suppliers. If suppliers possess a high power in influencing materials, raw materials, the prices of raw materials or logistics, that is a threat. The threat of customers. If customers have a high power to influence in the prices that you offered for your services and your products, then that threat is high. Once you get this external analysis done, you want to zoom in internally into your company. You want to see what are the strengths and the weaknesses internally, and then you want to assess how those weaknesses and strengths will interact with the external opportunities and threats. So that's how you're going to do that analysis. Once you do that analysis, then you're going to start heading into looking at industries. I want you to take in mind that there is a cyclical industry and a non-cyclical industry. And it's very interesting how those behave according to what the market is doing. So like necessities like electricity, utilities, food, well, those are non-cyclical, but cyclical industries will be, fancy food, things like that. Now let's take a look at COVID, and I say food a lot because it behaved very interesting in terms of restaurant owners for an event like COVID. Now, COVID was and it is a non-occurrent event, which is happened just one time. We have no data of any previous trend to determine how consumers were going to behave, but you could look at what the government was doing and then have a small prediction how consumers will behave. Because COVID has had us on lockdown, restaurants had to get a little bit savvier on how they presented their offerings since they had to close the doors. A few examples that caught my attention. A lot of Successful restaurants right now, actually were born during COVID times. And because their business model was so interesting that they allowed for, people to come in and pick up their fresh seafood, their fresh meals, pick and go. It was a very high rotational. They were able to boom during COVID and even flourish more now that they are allowed to have a sitting area, because now people can come in and enjoy their food at their establishment. Another one that actually took my attention as well was when they had to close the doors, and this particular restaurant worked with farmers from the community to create this very amazing, delicious farm-to-table boxes. And because of that, farmers, were able to sell their produce even more, and people were loving those boxes. And those boxes were humongous. They were like a feast for like 12 people, and you can have this at dinner and cook it for the whole family. So that was a very interesting way on how to pivot as well. So you gotta see how consumers behave and target those services accordingly, right? Then another thing that happened was the deliveries. You know that deliveries were one of the most booming services during lockdown, and a lot of restaurants adjusted to just do that, deliveries. And they standardized their menu to standardize their prices to lower their cost, to offer that menu at those prices through deliveries. So there was a lot of innovation happening, and this is when recession happens, when there's inflation going on. That's when people have these creative minds to solve problems that we don't see normally as consumers. So when consumers behave a different way, there is an innovative solution for that new pattern. So that's why successful businesses can happen during a recession or an inflated time. Once you do that, once you do your analysis and you determine the industry that you want to be at, and then you look at consumer trends and how they're behaving, you need to create a business model. I cannot stress it enough. I stress it all the time. You need to create a business model. You need to compile your data, your information in this model. And you need to do an executive summary, your analysis of the internal, external, how that's going to affect your strategy, what your strategy is going to be, what's the timeline for the strategy, what's it going to take to execute that strategy on that particular timeline. So all of those steps, and then one of the biggest ones is what will be your capital requirements to execute that strategy at that particular timeline. Once you gather all this information and you can understand what your capital requirements are at each level of your business growth and scalability, then you can go ahead and create a pro forma financial model and ask for funding. There's a lot of different places and sources where you can get your funding as a small business owner or as somebody that's starting a business. The first place I will look will be the government. The government, for different countries, in different countries behaves differently, but I will look to their government side and see what kind of loans and grants they offer, and if you qualify and what are their requirements. I would just apply to a lot of those. And then if you don't get that funding for either way, you can also look at banks, you can look at investors, and you can also contact us. This is what we do. We help entrepreneurs like yourself either start a business or during their business journey. And during the business journey, we help them find the funding that they need. But we also help them verify their capital needs and help them determine their capital needs for that funding. And we will be happy to help you through it as well. Go over to our blog to read more in detail about how to start a business in an inflated economy. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. I have a lot of videos there on how to create a financial model if you want to do it yourself. And if you want to contact us, we are here for you. And until next time. Bye.